Hello and welcome to episode 148 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And we're nearing 150 episodes. We've got a lot of great past guests on
Absolutely.
there from the world of novel writing, screenwriting, video game writing, comic writing, journalism, comedians. So do check out the back catalogue if you haven't done that already. But today we are in the world of crime, and specifically crime from the other side of the planet.
Yes, we're going down under to speak with the awesome Jane Harper this week, who I'm a bit huge fan of, and she's written some fantastic books. The Dry, obviously, is her big splash. Aaron Falk is her investigative homicide cop, who's come back for a couple of books, Force of Nature and the upcoming Exiles, which is out in the UK very, very soon. And it's a really fun chat we have with Jane. She's she started off as a journalist, and then she talks about her planning process, how she got started, what it was that kind of gave her the in to get her book out there.
And like I think we've had a couple of Australian authors on before. I had Chris Hammer and Diana Reid, but Chris, really, I think he mentioned that Jane's success with The Dry was something that really opened up Australian fiction as an international export possibility, essentially. So it was really great getting a chance to speak with her. Really interesting chat, hearing about her journey into the world of novel writing, and also, as you say, that planning process that she has. And we also discuss, her new book, Exiles, which is the final one in the Aaron Falk series. So we'll get straight into it after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer? Because I know, obviously, you went into journalism before you became a novelist.
Yeah, I did. So I always did want to be. I always wanted to be an author, but I didn't probably admit that to myself for quite a long time. Ever since I was a child, I always kind of had this sort of secret burning ambition to write a book. But then, as you grow older and sort of go to secondary school and uni and stuff, I really did not know how people did it, and so that kind of fell away a little bit. So I got into journalism really because I wanted to write, and that was a way of, writing professionally and getting paid for it. And I kind of put the novelist aspirations a little bit kind of in a hidden box and didn't really open that up for quite a lot of years.
And during that time as a journalist, were you working on fiction as well, or did you sort of keep it in that box for a while?
I completely kept it in the box. I didn't write any fiction at all. Sometimes you hear, novelists talk about how they were kind of, sort of, kind of scribbling away at kind of short stories and little snippets of chapters here and there, and developing things. But no, I didn't do anything. I mean, I really just. I honestly was not sure how to even start. Like, I kind of didn't want to take it seriously because I think then it would feel so overwhelming. And it just put me off, and the amount of, I guess, the sort of time and effort that I knew it would take. And you hear these horror stories about, the fraction of percent of people who actually get their novels published. And it really put me off, just thinking that there's no point. There's honestly no point even trying because it won't go anywhere. And that sort of held me back for years and years, really. And it was only when I was 34 when I started writing my debut novel, which was The Dry. And the only thing that changed in that whole time was a bit of a switch of mindset where I sort of came to this point where I realized I wanted to write a novel more than I feared failing. And I was able to kind of let go of that idea of what would happen next. And I thought, I'm just going to write it for myself and I'm going to assume nothing's going to happen, but at least I'll have done it.
And am I right in saying that you kind of, obviously The Dry was your first big book, and we'll chat about that and the process behind all that and stuff, but you had a short story published in the Big Issue magazine a couple of years before that came out. And I wonder, was that your first kind of recognition of your fiction writing that you'd had?
Yeah, and actually that was such a kind of important step for me in that it was around a time when I was starting to have this kind of mental mind shift. And I saw, just by complete chance, this kind of call out for the fiction edition of the Big Issue, and this for stories. And they were so short. It was 1,000 words or something. And I thought, I don't know if I can write a novel, but maybe I can write 1,000 words. I mean, I did it every day for, in my journalism job. I'm doing it on all these things I'm not interested in. Maybe I can do it for something I actually am kind of interested in. So, yes, I sort of wrote this just little kind of 1,000-word, little mystery story. And it was one of 12 that got selected to be in the magazine. And I can't even tell you what a boost of confidence that gave me, just seeing my name, next to the story. And there's like a little presentation and things. And it was so, that was kind of the point where I thought, this is so great. And this is the most rewarding feeling I've had kind of in any kind of work related capacity for years. I really, I would love to kind of replicate this. So that was almost like the kind of the kickstart I needed to then write that novel. And I went pretty much straight into writing The Dry, actually, like almost, probably the following week I kind of sat down and really started thinking about that seriously.
So, I mean, I think I'm right in saying The Dry came out in 2016, so a couple of years or so after that short story. I mean, how long, once you started writing that novel, having had all of these doubts, I suppose, playing in your mind, how long did it take you to get that to a state that you were happy sending off to someone?
In hindsight, it took almost no time. Like, in hindsight, now working as a professional novel author, I can't believe how fast I turned that out, actually. And I think it was that kind of beginner's, that sort of confidence of like, you don't really know the task ahead of you, so you just kind of plunge into it. So the timeline was, I wrote that short story for the Big Issue, and that would have been 2014. Then I pretty much went straight into, I'm going to write this novel. I signed up for a 12-week online course because I had this sort of theory that, I wasn't sure I could write a novel, but I was always a bit of a goody two-shoes at school, and I knew I could do my homework. And I thought, I can, if I've got this kind of external pressure, I can submit chapters and turn up for the assignments or whatever. So that was kind of what led me to that. And you had to submit an idea and a bit of a synopsis. So that's how I came up with the idea for The Dry, for that my application for the course. I wrote probably half of the first draft within sort of those 12 weeks, and then I kind of race to the finish line. So by the end of the year, I started writing it in October, and by the end of the year, so end of December, I had like a 40,000 word completed draft.
Brilliant.
Which, I'd kind of just set myself that as an artificial deadline. I continued working on it, and then in April 2015, so about 6 months after I started writing it, I entered it in an unpublished manuscript competition. By that point, it was like 70,000 words or something, and I won that competition, and that was for me what completely opened the doors. And suddenly, I had publishers and agents asking if they could read it. So it was about 6 months from kind of the initial idea through to winning this manuscript competition. And then there was like another 6 months of going through publishers and getting my publishing deals and going through their editorial process. And then it came out then the following year in 2016.
And do you think your day job as the journalist and having had to write to deadlines and things like that, do you think that helped with that initial, and putting that because a lot of people can get a lot of pressure and they can meander and all of that sort of thing, but perhaps your journalism helped you focus on the actual writing and get those words down?
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think that was a huge part of what helped me get those words down in the first place, because I was so kind of match fit for it. I was at the computer every single day writing hundreds of words, thousands on features and interviewing people and all kinds of things. So it wasn't a huge leap for me to then sit at a computer and turn out 1,000 words of a novel. Mm-hmm. And that really helps. And also those kind of core disciplines of things like being able to express your ideas clearly on the page, and being aware of trying to engage the reader. You're writing for an audience, being very used to that kind of thing. So all those that stuff really helped me. And I found it very transferable. I mean, there's still skills that I use to this day, really.
And what's your when you sit down to do the writing, what's your style? Do you do a lot of planning? Do you spend a lot of your time planning the story out, plot points, character beats, setting, etc.?
Yeah, I do. I'm such a big planner. That's why I'm so interested in your notebooks, because I just think it's, for me, I know some authors just absolutely don't go for it at all. And, I fully respect really anybody's process, because whatever helps you get the words on the page, that is the right way to do it. For me, though, the right way to do it is just to plan it to the nth degree. So I spend longer planning it and outlining it than I do writing a novel every single time. I mean, I would probably spend 6 or 7 months kind of planning it. And I get to the point where I have the entire thing mapped out, chapter by chapter, how the chapters are going to start and end, exactly what's going to happen, where they're going to have that conversation, what clues are going to be revealed for the reader. And so when I actually sit down to write it, I only write it when I'm sort of, I've worked through all the kinks and everything that needs to be untangled, and I know that all those scenes are the right ones and they're going to appear in a finished novel, and it's just a question of executing it as best I can. So I've done all the thinking. It's now just literally about the writing.
It's interesting because the more we speak to authors about this process, and some of them are planners, some are pantsers or whatever, but really they're all talking about they're doing the same thing. They categorize it as a different thing. And obviously you're planning in great detail there, but it almost sounds like you've got a sort of skeleton draft by the time you're starting to draft it there. So in a way you're working through it in the same way that someone, someone that says, oh, I don't plan at all would be doing. And often their first draft is a very slapdash thing to try and get through the story kind of a thing. So there's although people make this distinction, there seems to be a similarity between the two approaches sometimes.
Thank you for saying that. You were the first person who has said that, and I completely agree, because I always want to say to people who are pantsers, I want to say we do the same thing. The only difference is I don't write it out. Mm-hmm. So we have to go through exactly the same process, like what's going to happen and who's going to do what and where's this bit going to fall. The only difference I can see is that I literally stick to note form until I'm sure, whereas some people like to write out the whole scene. But it's still a question of that trial and error. And the reason I sort of like to kind of plan, I guess in note form, is that I find it allows me to test out more things in a quicker time. So, I don't have to commit 10,000 words. I can commit 10 sentences, and is it working? So I just find it more efficient. But I agree. I think it's exactly the same process. You still have to work through the story. It's just a question of how much, I guess, you feel you have to put on the page to know whether it's the right route or not.
Yeah, definitely.
And I imagine that means that you've kind of, when you come to switch to the formal writing stage, you must have a cleaner first draft then, I imagine, because you've done so much planning. And your editing from that point on must be faster.
Yeah, I mean, the first draft is really clean, actually. Like, I mean, I guess that's why I do it, because I do find it so much more efficient. So I've already worked through the stuff. So the first draft is it's almost. I mean, I could probably submit it to the editors, and I mean, I only really write kind of one draft in a way, and then I'd probably print out that whole thing. I'd go through it again, but it's pretty close. The only thing is, though, sometimes I do find, interestingly, is that however hard I plan, there's always things that don't then quite work out on the page. Okay. So things that like look good in the plan, but then when you actually get on the page, you realize that maybe the characters are just, the scene jump is too much. You need like a little connecting scene to show them getting from A to B, or quite often actually there's too much. So you think you can kind of get all in a plan. It looks like it's one chunk and you can get all this in, and then you realize on the page it's actually too much. Like it just needs to be slowed down a little bit, and then I have to kind of. So then I'd go back to the plan. I'd like kind of rework. Yeah, I'd rework it in the plan before I went back to then write it on the manuscript.
And in terms of sort of jumping back, I suppose, to when you got picked up, obviously you did this competition, which was a massive foot in the door, as you say, opened the doors for you. But we spoke with a couple of other Australian authors. We spoke with Diana Reid and we spoke with Chris Hammer, and the literary scene in Australia seems to be much smaller, but growing fast, I think is probably the way to describe it. And does that make it easier or harder to break into the literary scene there? Because obviously it's a smaller scene to break into, but perhaps more competition, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't really have an answer for it, because I guess you only know your own journey,
sure.
And that was kind of how, and I didn't really know much about the industry before I won that competition. I wasn't kind of, some people are very involved and they in a lot of writer circles and things, but I was just kind of working full time as a journalist and I wasn't really in it. So my first exposure was kind of, winning this competition and suddenly getting kind of embraced by it, I guess. So for me, it was very positive. It is interesting though, because I mean, it is, I guess, probably more tight knit. But whether that makes it more competitive, I don't know. Because I mean, you think, well, I mean, have Australians embraced my books because they love reading about Australia? But then at the same time, there's lots of Australian books in Australia. There's lots of other people who write about Australia. So it's hard to know. Yeah, I haven't really got a good answer. It's an interesting question though, and I think it just shows how different each market and territory really is.
Yeah,
Australia as a setting, though, we said this before as well. It strikes me as a setting that is so ripe for sort of the types of stories that you tell and Chris Hammer tells and stuff like that. It has everything. It's got these centres of big cities with very diverse cities, and it's also got the outback where there's nothing. It's got sort of like to look at something that's been more successful in previous years, the sort of American Midwest wide open type situation as well. So I just find it odd that it's taken so long for Australian fiction to sort of have that international reach when the setting is so rich, I think, for some great stories there.
Yeah, I mean, the setting is such a gift. Like, I think I agree. I mean, the setting is just whatever you want, it's there. You want like a bustling metropolis, you've got it. You want, kind of, I don't know, the wide open spaces, you've got them. You want touristy beaches, you've got them. It is so kind of ripe for picking. And I think, I mean, as an author, I mean, that's just one of the best things about it. there's just settings that they're almost too good for fiction. You know, some things that are like, I always feel with fiction, like it's not just it can't just be real. It kind of has to feel real as well.
Yeah,
and there's some sort of settings in Australia that is so kind of out there. You think, God, it'd be great to set a book here, but would it feel too fictional even from the outset?
It's funny because you have a bit I think it's The Lost Man, where, you know, you chat about how when you drive off into this part of Australia, you have to have like a pack full of like water and supplies, because if your car breaks down, you could be, you know, stranded for. And I was like, it's like an alien planet, you know. It's like another part of the world that I've never experienced and stuff. And it is ripe for a kind of story, but unlike most I've ever actually read, to be honest. It's a great setting, and I'm amazed how long it's taken for Australian fiction to kind of become big in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, The Lost Man was, is such a great case in point. I mean, that research trip for that was just so eye-opening because, you know, I think all Australians, we like to think we're kind of, you know, one with the land, and we kind of embrace the outback. But in truth, most of us like barely venture outside of the urbanized areas, you know. You know, I went out to this complete outback setting and had to kind of I sort of managed to meet this prearranged meet this guy who was a cop in Birdsville, which is this outback town, and he for 10 years he was the only police officer there, and he policed an area the size of the UK all on his own for a decade. And it's just mind-boggling. And you know, and he and I drove like 11 hours across the desert, and we saw like 5 cars that whole time, which was apparently a busy day. And it was so you know, and just that kind of, I think, that sort of needing to have all your supplies in the car, being so kind of isolated, even on like a, you know, and knowing that actually, you know, if something happens, no one else might come along. It's not something I think that most people in the Western world kind of experience.
No, totally.
You know, at all, really. So yeah, that was a great one. I had such a blast researching that one.
And obviously, when The Dry came out, it was a huge hit, New York Times bestseller, won awards, been made into a movie, which we'll ask you about later on. But, you know, that again must have, you've had these steps. You had the big issue story, which gave you the belief that you could write the novel. Then you had the competition for The Dry itself that opened the doors for you. And then for it to be received so well must have just been the stuff of dreams, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and I mean, it has been, because you know, all I really wanted to do originally was I just wanted to write a book, you know, and it was the bar was no higher than that. I just wanted to sort of get something published, and and so yeah, I mean, for the Dry and all the books really to have been embraced the way they have. I mean, you know, that's what you do it for, I guess, for the readers, and that is like probably that is really the best part of the whole experience, is having readers say that they enjoyed it and they've shared it with their families, and you know, wanting to sort of connect on that level.
Yeah. And since The Dry, you've written 2 more books with the same protagonist, Aaron Falk. Force of Nature was your second book, and Exiles is your new one, which is out February 2023 here in the UK. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what that book's about.
Yeah, sure. So Exiles is, yes, it's the third and final one featuring Aaron Falk, and he this one goes to this sort of lush wine region in South Australia for the christening of a family friend's child, and the story opens with a mother going missing at a busy food and wine festival. And that's kind of the catalyst for the mystery. But I think, like all my books, the thing that most interests me is the sort of the aftermath and the relationships and the way the ripple effects of, you know, a traumatic event kind of impact the whole community. And so, yeah, I mean, this was a great one to write. I mean, I went into it in Exiles knowing that this will be the third and final book. So that was kind of a good, you know, a good writing experience for me, because I think going into something knowing it's going to be the last one, you can kind of leave it all on the field. You know, you can do exactly what you can make it exactly what you want it to be, because you don't need to save anything in a tank for the future.
It's interesting that you have decided, you know, because often with these sorts of books, people have the recurring character, and that's what draws an audience back to them, because it may be an entirely new story, but there's the familiarity of the main protagonist, I suppose. What made you decide that this is it? This is the last one that I want to do with this character?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a bittersweet decision because I mean, I have loved writing about him, and he's been, Aaron Falk's been with me since page one of book one, which was a dry, so he's been with me the whole time. But I think it was actually really because of that, though. I mean, people have asked, is it because you were bored, or you wanted to move on? But that's not the case at all. It's actually because, he's a character who means so much to me. My sort of feeling is that in fiction, especially, like, endings are really important. And you've got to end strong. You can't just start strong. You've got to end strong, and that goes for kind of a series as well. And when I think of some of my favorite series, like books and TV shows and film trilogies or whatever, something a lot of them have in common is that the creator has known when to say when. And and I think part of being an author is being kind of honest with yourself about, I mean, not every character has the legs for 20 books. It's kind of knowing like how long you really feel you can sustain sort of the quality and the believability of that character. So I wanted to give him like an ending that was right for him, and was sort of deserving of a character who has given me so much. So that was really behind the decision, putting aside any kind of other commercial incentives or whatever, and just trying to really be true to what I felt was right for him as a character.
I think that's interesting because obviously you're right. Endings in fiction are so important, and I think I'm thinking we spoke with Daniel Abraham, who is one half of the writing team for the Expanse novels, which are obviously science fiction, but interesting that he was like, absolutely, after book 9, that is it. That is the end of the story, because a lot of these things people assume, oh, maybe you'll go back, maybe you'll revisit it. But the beauty of a story, as you say, is whether it's over one book, whether it's over 3 or 9 or whatever, is that there is an ending. It comes to a conclusion and then you can move on. And it is something, especially from a commercial point of view, that I think some authors are pressured not to do in some way.
I think it helped that I'd written 2 standalones as well. And, over the 5 books, 2 of them are standalones. So I kind of had ripped that Band-Aid off a little bit. It was, I think there's sort of certain points maybe in your, I suppose, your career or as trajectory as an author where you can do certain things. And then if you miss that window, maybe the window doesn't come along again for another couple of books. I think kind of having done the standalones, and I knew, I actually honestly find standalones a bit more fit in better with my writing style as well. In that, when you've got, my sort of style is more kind of plot driven first, and then the characters are built around that to sort of to tell a story in the best way. Whereas when you've got a recurring character, they are at the heart of it, and then the plot is built around them. So it's a slightly different way, and you do have those constrictions, I guess, when you've got to bear in mind what's happened before and what is true to that character where they are now. Whereas with standalones, I mean, everything's on the table, and you can have anyone and be anywhere with it.
I'm assuming the choice of setting was inspired after your research trip to the Outback. Were you like, actually, I quite fancy a research trip to a nice vineyard somewhere?
You're not wrong, honestly. I actually thought, and I'd also so I went to the Outback, and then for the following book, The Survivors, which was set in kind of rugged coastal Tasmania, I'd actually given birth to my second child 12 weeks earlier, and then I had to go do this research trip to Tasmania, which involved me. There's a scene in The Survivors where there's a shipwreck. This part of a diving expedition, and tourists go and dive around this shipwreck, and I didn't know anything about diving, so I had to basically go diving in these like freezing Tasmanian waters. So I was zipping myself into a wetsuit, like having given birth like 12 weeks earlier, and I honestly thought, you know what, never again. Like next time, we're going to wine country. So.
And obviously, just going back to the dry, as I mentioned, it's been made into a film. Reese Witherspoon bought the rights to it, and obviously Eric Bana was in the movie that came out in 2021. I mean, how did that process work? How involved were you?
Yeah, it was good. I was lucky, really, with the team that bought it. So Made Up Stories were the producers, and then the screenplay was written by a guy called Robert Connolly, who also directed it. So he really was like a huge driving force behind, what a great film it turned out to be. And he lives actually really close to me and stuff. And so he was very collaborative, and we spoke a lot. And I think the great thing about Robert was he really, he kind of completely puts his own ego aside. He doesn't have an ego, but he completely puts himself aside, and he really embraced the book and understood what readers had responded to, and just did a great adaptation that I thought completely captured that kind of spirit of it. And it doesn't always happen. I mean, I've had other scripts come through for, other novels of mine which are just do not do that, and it's so disappointing. And it sort of made me really realize how lucky I was with that film, that it turned out so well. I don't know if you've seen it, but I was actually in it as well, which was a lot of fun. So I'm at the funeral, and my husband as well, at the second row, and then we're also at the wake, playing grieving townspeople very beautifully. So
I need to watch it again to spot that.
That's right. We were there for 2 days filming. I think we like a couple of my friends and my brother's in it. You won't know, but you've definitely seen my brother. He actually did theatre studies at uni and used that knowledge to position himself directly behind Eric Bana, to the point where even when they were filming Eric's close-up, my brother had to stay in, but like gradually they released it. Okay, you can go, you had a shot. My brother had to stay there until the very last scene because he was so on Eric's shoulder that they couldn't cut him out. That's right. So he's definitely in it. But 2 days of filming in the baking sun, we're on for about 4 seconds, but it was totally worth it. Like, just get your pause button ready.
Is there a part of you when it comes to like adaptations of your work, is there a part of you that, I mean, it sounds like you're obviously protective of your characters and your plots and your books and stuff. And is there a part of you that puts that to one side and says, well, there's a commercial aspect to it as well? What serves the screen might not serve the book, and you have to trust that whoever's making the film knows what they're doing, and things you maybe don't think make sense for a book might work better for a screen, or is that kind of trust part of it?
Yeah, I mean that's the ideal, and that's exactly what I kind of try and I work towards that. I think it's quite hard. It honestly depends a bit on who's got it. I mean, when Robert Connolly had it, there were, he did exactly that. I think there were things that are sort of different on screen than they are in a book, but they're so faithful to the spirit of the book that you can't really separate them. I mean, I guess I sometimes recognize them because I know the book quite well, but I think you don't watch a film and think, oh, that's just film or that's different from the book, because it's very organic. Yeah. So that was great. And I think having that level of trust is really important. But I mean, sometimes, there's this scripts that just don't get it. And you can tell whoever's involved, they want to make something different, and it's, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not a screenwriter, and I don't really know, I don't really know why that approach is different and why it works so well. Some people can just really get it, and some people just kind of see it more as a springboard for something completely different. But yeah, it definitely helps a lot when you've got someone like Robert Connolly, who really got that kind of level of trust, and you can just kind of know that he's going to, do the right thing, really.
And do you have because obviously you've said that you've had other scripts for some of your books that were disappointing. I mean, how much of a say do you have over these things? Once the option is taken, how much input do you have?
Yeah, I mean, none really. I mean, that's sort of even when they're being collaborative, it's all kind of just courtesy rather than legally binding or anything. I mean, it's a bit like, I always kind of liken it to sort of, it's like, selling your beloved childhood home, and you can do all your research, and you can, sell it to people who say they're going to love it, and they're going to, move their family in and everything. And you sort of have to kind of take that on faith. But then if you sell it and then you drive by in 6 months' time and it's now a 6-story block of flats, you can't go knocking on the door and complain, really, because you don't own it anymore.
Good analogy, I like that. Yeah.
So you just kind of hope it is someone who, does love it and, kind of replants the flower beds and, puts in a double glazing and stuff. But yeah, it's a huge leap of faith, really.
And am I right in saying that Force of Nature's, the second Falk book, has also been made into a movie?
Yeah, so the filming is completed. The film is actually sort of in the final editing stages. Like as we speak, I'm actually due to go and see that next week.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so that'll
Any
be
starring
fun.
part in that one?
No, I wasn't. We no, I know we tried actually, but it was this one was like I got to go on set and see them, and honestly, they were just every single person was just kind of muttering under their breath about how tough the shoot was, because it was out in like bushland in winter, and people kept on coming and showing me pictures of leeches on their phones. You know, look at this one. You know, like I don't know, I just thrust them into my face, and they were having to kind of carry the cameras like 20 minutes down like a tiny like bushland track, and so yeah, so it actually didn't. We did actually try, but there weren't many opportunities. It just didn't. The time just didn't work out. Which there was one opportunity where maybe. But it involved sort of getting there at like 4 a.m. and putting on like an SES rescue worker suit and like traipsing through this leech-ridden bushland. And I thought, oh, do you know what? I might just go on an easier day and drink coffee and watch from the sidelines.
Your brother must be in there somewhere. Surely he's
I know.
just always hovering behind Eric Bana.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And is script writing, writing a screenplay or something you would ever want to try yourself, or are you happy in the prose world?
I think I'm happier leaving it to the people who love it. You know, it is a bit of a different style of writing, and I mean, I suppose it's something you could, if I kind of put my mind to it, you could probably learn it and kind of get to grips with it. But it is quite different, and I think anything that sort of takes me away from the novels, it has to be worth it. I mean, the novels for me, they're kind of the absolute core of what I love to do and my business, and that's sort of why I got into writing. And so anything that would sort of take me away from that for a big length of time has to sort of be better than that. And I haven't really found anything else that I feel as passionate about.
Yeah. What's your daily routine? Once you finish a novel, do you take time off? Are you writing every day for a bit? Have you got a word target? How does it work?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of depends where I am in the process. So I don't write every day when I'm not working on it. I'm not sort of I do kind of take quite a lot of time off between the books, especially because I always think like I was saying before, the planning and thinking stages are really important. I mean, that is such valuable time well spent for me, and it always pays off. So after I've kind of the books completed, like I won't sort of go near the computer for quite a long time, but then when I'm writing, it gradually builds up. I start off doing a couple of days a week. So I've got 2 children who are 6 and 3, so I sort of do it during school hours, and I start off going in a few days a weweek, and then as it gets close to the deadline, I'm in kind of 7 days a week, from dusk till dawn, dawn till dusk, and then the deadline kind of hits and it sort of slows down again. So I think though, I mean, my sort of biggest thing, I guess I tell like aspiring writers, is to find a bit of consistency. I mean, I can kind of afford now to take the time off because I know my process well enough that I know I can get back into it when I need to. But I think in those early days, just doing like a little bit often was such an important part of that to build that habit.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to ask, you said earlier on that in your standalone books, it's about the plot, and then when you've got your kind of Falk books, it's more about fitting the plot around the characters. But where does a plot come from for you? Where do you get the idea for a new book? Do you have a process that you go through news articles or something to spark things, or do things just kind of pop up by themselves?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I actually also love to kind of tell aspiring writers, is that I feel like there's so much emphasis on this kind of myth that you get this like kind of lightning strike of an idea, and suddenly the idea for the book is there. It's like, great, I'm going to write a book about that, and this is going to happen. And the thing I kind of really would love to get across is that the ideas, the idea itself is nothing. It's the execution of it. So I mean, really, all the ideas in all my books kind of boil down to the same thing, which is something's happened, it looks like this, but it's actually this, and it's that kind of and then you kind of sitting there for ages, sort of for months, of thinking, okay, so what has happened, and what does it look like, and what has really happened, and what are those sort of avenues. So really early on, I'm looking for kind of just, I guess, a initial kind of hook that maybe draws me in. Like it could just be like a good setting, or a little bit of an idea about, what if someone did something and there was a bit of a question around what really happened with it. But then, that from there you're kind of testing out, okay, so who is that person and where is the setting and what does it look like? And it's like, when you go to the optometrist and they do that thing where they put, is this one better or is this one better? Is it, one or two? And so I'm constantly kind of combing through, like, is it one or two? And then, okay, now is it one or two, and which one is better? And you're trying to constantly find the better idea. And I feel like I know when I've hit that, when it just feels, it sort of settles and suddenly it opens up more avenues. It feels like I can't really imagine in any other way that it could be. It just feels like So I just, because I think one thing that put me off when I was starting was you just feel like you've got to have that lightning strike. And for me, it just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, there is a sort of pressure that you've got to have this, amazing high concept one line pitch that you can tell anyone and they'll just be desperate to read it. But as you say, it's all about the execution. A lot of stories, if you break them down into one line, sound very similar.
Especially crime, right?
Yeah.
So much
exactly.
crime is a dead person and an investigation. As you say, it's how you tell that story which makes it separate from the rest.
Absolutely. And I think, it's the kind of thing where, I could go out and tell people all my, I don't even have lots of ideas. It's not like I have like a whole barrel full of ideas. Like, you kind of have one idea and you sort of build it up and, is it the right idea? And you sort of test it out. But, you could tell someone your initial idea and they would write a completely different book.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the important thing is it interests you. It interests you enough that you feel like there's those avenues of questions or the journey of the character, whatever it is you're wanting to write about. Like, does it have enough opportunity? And that's, I guess, what I'm always looking for.
Mm-hmm. And so Exiles is out soon in the UK, but what is next? Are you working on something now, or have you already got the next one in the pipeline?
No, I haven't. So yeah, Exiles came out it came out recently in Australia, then it's out in the UK in early February. And so at the moment I'm just sort of working through the kind of publication tasks, I guess, around that, like the sort of I guess it's sort of, for me, it kind of I find it hard to think about more than one book at a time. So I almost have to get one, like the one that's published, done, and then I can sort of turn my mind to it. So it is around this time that I would start thinking about the next one. I've got, I mean, my kids are still really young and I've had quite a grueling, I've sort of turned out 5 books since 2016, which was 6 years ago. So I'm sort of taking my time a little bit just to get back to the computer and So what's
think of a nice place to go for a research trip. Yeah.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, that's a top priority.
What was the last book that you read?
So the last book today, actually really enjoyed, that I read recently, was this is by a guy called Benjamin Stevenson, and he's Australian, and he's actually a comedian, but he's also an author, and he's written this great book called Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, which is out currently now available in the UK. It is so fun. It's like this really cool, funny take on classic crime. So I don't know if like Only Murders in the Building and that sort of thing, where it's that sort of, it's got that kind of vibe about it. Just it's got all these, the kind of everything you love about classic crime, but kind of wrapped up in this really fresh original package.
That's cool. Okay.
Where I'd highly recommend it if you like the kind of crime genre. It's I haven't read anything like it before, and it's so well done. So yeah, so it's Benjamin Stevenson. Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone.
Brilliant. Oh, definitely check that out. What about the last film that you watched?
Last film? Oh God. Do you know what? I actually, because my children are so demanding, I rarely get a chance to watch actual films. I'll tell you what I've been watching on TV though. I've been working my way through the Netflix series Drive to Survive. Drive to Survive. It's the F1. Yeah, it's the F1 like reality show, which I would have said I have no interest in F1, but my God, that show is gripping. Like that is a masterclass in editing, because I am hooked. I've watched I'm on like series 4, and I've just watched it back to back. So it's that's how you do it. Just
excellent. Yeah, I love a good Netflix documentary.
The other sports one, which I didn't think I would enjoy, but I loved, was the Michael Jordan one.
The Last Dance.
Last Dance.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't know anything about basketball, but that was just fantastic.
I agree. And it was actually there was an Australian on that team who barely got mentioned in the documentary. So then there was a whole bunch of Australian documentaries that came out after that, featuring this Australian player and like the contribution he'd made. You know, so that was a little bit of local flavour as well.
Well, the very, very last thing we always do is a super quick fire either or, and I always say there's no right answer here apart from one. But we'll start off with let's go for Leanne Moriarty or Chris Hammer.
Leanne Moriarty.
TV or cinema?
TV.
Night Owl or Early Bird?
Early Bird.
Music or no music when you're writing?
Oh, music, but without lyrics. Instrumental only.
Okay, yep. And the last one, let's go for audiobook or ebook.
Oh God. Can say neither. I'm a print fan through and through.
That's brilliant, because Tarek changed it. We always used to ask real book or ebook, like as in print book or ebook, because no one would say ebook. So he changed the question, and someone still says print book.
I'm not sure what I can compare an ebook to get people to pick an ebook, to be honest.
That's right. Ebook or nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So even when you change the question, Tarek, audiobook, ebook, she still picks real book.
I'm not sure what I can do anymore. It's obviously a conspiracy. There's obviously some kind of global conspiracy that authors just really hate ebooks, and I'm sick to the back teeth of it, quite frankly.
Well, thanks very much to Jane for coming on to the podcast. I thought that was a really interesting chat, and interesting. I mentioned it at the start of the podcast, but choosing to end the series of Aaron Falk books, which, as she says, endings are important in stories, and I think it is a brave decision, but it can be very satisfying when you have a proper closure to a character. Absolutely, even if it's after a few books or whatever, but often very tempting to continue that character on into further books.
Yeah, and flies in the face of folk like Rankin or Michael Connolly with his Bosch books, etc. Where people get to know a character over 15, 20 books, etc. There's something to be said about going the other way and saying, you know what, I'm going to give you a good ending, and that's worth more than 18 more books to this character. And I like as you say, it is a brave move, and I like and it makes you think it must be quite a good ending if she's chosen to end it. Something.
Yeah, although
dies,
Rankin did retire Rebus and then brought him back and stuff.
That's
so
true.
There's always that possibility.
There's always ways. Yeah,
exactly. So thanks to Jane. Exiles is out on the 2nd of February, so you can pick that one up. In the UK, it's already out in Australia, but we'll put a link in the podcast description so you can order that if you want to. And next week, we've got another great guest in the world of crime and thrillers.
Yeah, another female crime writer, Louise Candlish, who her latest book is The Only Suspect. It's out next month as well. And another really interesting chat, another person she's written almost a book a year for the last 15 years or so. It's really impressive. And her process is much like other people who've written this many books. It's very interesting to learn how she does it, what she focuses on, how she gets hits those deadlines every year.
Employs her husband as a researcher. It's quite an important part of it, it sounds like. But
First
also,
person I've ever met.
The Only Suspect is interesting because she said it in 1995, which we had quite a fun discussion about the advantages of setting crime books, especially in the era before technology, modern technology like phones, social media, CCTV, etc., which must ruin so many plots, potential plots for crime writers.
So many old school Hitchcock movies just wouldn't work nowadays. I mean, you could just phone the person up.
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
there they are. Yeah,
exactly.
I'll just find my iPhone. Yeah, the next.
I'll just check the Ring camera footage. Oh, there they are.
It's under the patio.
That's who it was.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really fun chat. So please do tune in for that one. If you enjoyed this episode, though, please do take time to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app, because that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UK Page One, or send us an email, which is podcast@rightgear.co.uk.
Still not
and
brave
it's also
enough
Mastodon.
Still not
I was
brave
actually
enough.
looking up
Look at the podcast description. It tells you how to do it. Writing.exchange
we have a podcast description?
/ at page one pod is how you find us on Mastodon as well, if you're on that platform. But otherwise, have a great week, and we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well, so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UK Page One, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.